This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 333.
So, if a business deal, a marketing problem, a business problem comes to me, I'm thinking about everything that I know that I've encountered before in every situation that is not business as much as I am business. And then it's somehow identifying like not being constrained, I guess, to a formula that let's say, I'll use business acquisitions as an example because I think it's a good one, is the way you buy businesses, you pay money for it. I don't accept that, right? I don't accept that as a fact of how you buy businesses.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 333, and today we continue our Best Of series with Roland Frasier, CEO of All Channels Media, on creative business deals, modeling and masterminding.
I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs, and I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. So every 2 weeks, I'll bring a deep diving interview with one of these CEOs or another one of a mid to large organisation so you can find your own path to greatness as an executive.
In this episode, I replay a chat I had with Roland Frasier. At the time of our conversation in 2018, Roland was the CEO of War Room Mastermind. He is currently the CEO of All Channels Media and is also a principal in digitalmarketer.com, the Scalable company, Epic Network, and Traffic and Conversion Summit. He is the co-founder and or principal of multiple Inc. magazine fastest growing companies and a serial entrepreneur who has founded, scaled or sold almost 24 different businesses ranging from consumer products to industrial machine manufacturing and SaaS businesses, all with turnovers between $3 million and $337 million. His expertise covers digitally centric customer acquisition, activation, referral, retention, revenue and growth strategies, and plan implementation. And he is a guru in the art of the deal. He's also one of the most humble and generous chiefs you will ever meet. Today, you're going to hear Roland talk all about how to buy property and businesses for no money down, infusing creativity into business deals and structuring deals even if you are a full-time employee, what made his mastermind, the War Room, such a winning program, and the lineage of his learning way back to the greats like Milton Erickson, John Grinder, and Richard Bell.
G'day, Chief. Now, are you in need of an operating rhythm? An operating rhythm is that schedule of meetings. Actually, it's a bit more than that. It's a system, the drum and beat of your team. And what it will do if you get it right is it will create the culture and drive the results. It will bond the team together. It will handle risk, help you see around corners, create creativity, embed the rituals and traditions of your team. There is so much that an operating rhythm can deliver when done right. So Chief, if you'd like to know how to do that, just get our full free resource on it. Just go to chiefmaker.com/operating rhythm, and there's a detailed PDF there with all the hows and whats and whys, some of the pitfalls, and an example schedule for you to follow. chiefmaker.com/operating rhythm and create the drumbeat for success in your team.
Chief, before we get into today's episode, if you would like to nominate a CEO as guest of this show, drop us a line with your nominated guest on info@chiefmaker.com.au and we'll check out and see if they are the kind of chief we want to have on our show. Okay, Chief, let's listen to our Best Of series guest, Roland Frasier. Okay, Roland, well, welcome to the Inner Chief. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I spent a few days with you, maybe about a month back in Austin, Texas. It was an absolute pleasure to hear you talk and about your massive career, your really successful career. But I'd like to know where it all started. Can you tell us a bit of a story about something that sums up your childhood?
Oh gosh, I just have always been passionate about business. My father was a tax attorney, actually still is a tax attorney, and so I got to meet a continuing cast of colorful characters who all had businesses because he primarily catered to entrepreneurs, and so I was always around entrepreneurs when I was younger, and just really enjoyed everything about business. I just thought it was so cool. So it's always been a fascination and a passion, and it continues to be so to this day.
Well, tell us about your first job. I think your first job, if I'm correct, was in a skate shop. Is that right?
Yeah, my first real job was there. I had a summer job as a assistant pro tennis instructor, which basically meant you blow the you sweep actually at the time the tennis courts of leaves and things like that, and you train the youngest kids, which is kind of like babysitting with children with weapons. So it's maybe a little more glamorous sounding as assistant pro when you're applying, and when you get in and they have a bunch of 6-year-olds with tennis rackets and balls, it's maybe a little more dangerous than you thought it was. And then I did a brief one at a water park where I was like the guy at the top that was telling people they could go and not go. So those were two very glamorous and sexy
Wow.
jobs that I held prior to being a skate clerk at Golden Skate World. So that job was actually like a regular job that I went to, summer, winter. I think I
Yeah.
worked there for about a year.
Yeah.
So that was my last job too. So that was kind of interesting.
Oh, so by that, what you mean is ever since then you've been self-employed.
I have, in fact, yes.
Wow. Okay. So now you started out in the real estate industry. Is that right? When you first went out on your own?
Yeah, I got I actually went out and got my license when I was 18. You had to be 18 to have one.
Mm.
And I had earlier kind of been involved with folks in real estate, and I found actually my father introduced me to a book by a guy named Robert Allen, who wrote a real estate book called Nothing Down, which was how to invest in real estate, nothing down. Curiously enough, Bob Allen now lives right down the street from me. And I see him in the post office from time to time. So it's kind of
Oh, wow.
interesting that all throughout my life, all these things, there were three, I think, real programs that got me into everything that I would say, were my first exposures to all the cool mindset stuff, business stuff. Bob Allen's Nothing Down was one. And like I said, now he lives down the street, and I've talked to him several times. And he actually has come to several of our events. And the other was a guy named Dennis Waitley, who did an audiobook program with Nightingale Conant called The Psychology of Winning. And I think he had a book as well, but I listened to the audio program. And then Tony Robbins, who wrote a book way back when called Unlimited Power. And so those three people had a lot of impact on my my future thinking. And it turns out that Tony Robbins became a client of my law firm for several years, and Dennis Waitley became a business partner for a few years and a client of my law firm. And Bob Allen, I see at our events and is a neighbor. So it's really such a strange thing. I grew up in Virginia, and all of those guys are in California or were. Tony's in Florida now, and but Dennis lived in La Jolla, Tony lived in La Jolla, and Bob in Rancho Santa Fe. So it's kind of funny, just a small circular world that we live in. How these things that impact you early on can come back and connect with you later.
Yeah, for certain. I'm wondering, is there anything that I suppose talks to how you thought about the world before and then after, like the Psychology of Winning audio series? What did that do to shape your thinking? That was a paradigm shift, do you think?
Well, the big things were I had never heard of when I read Bob's book on real estate. It was just amazing to me that you could buy real estate with no money down, and the first time that you do that, when I talk about buying companies with no money down, so the impact for me was ultimately I took those principles and said, what if I just did that with companies? And it turns out you can. And it's actually easier, I think. And when I give that talk to people who are interested in acquiring companies, I ask if there's anyone who's ever experienced buying real estate for no money down. And there's always, 4 or 5 hands that go up. And I'm like, you can't really appreciate how cool it is to buy a house or an apartment building or something and not have to pay any money when you're sitting at the table and they sign it over to you and you're like, I literally gave you $0 to do that. It's amazing. And it's the same thing the first time that you buy a company and you pay $0 and you're like, holy crap. And now I was able to acquire this business and I didn't have to pay anything down for it. I mean, you have to pay something for it, but I didn't pay anything down for it. And so that book impacted me in thinking about that. And it's also really funny because I remember thinking then his examples were all acquiring properties with 6 or 8% interest rates. And I was like, oh my God, because at the time I think interest rates were 12 or 14%. I was like, there's never going to be, what the hell? It's never going to be that cheap again. And now it's half of what it was, when he was talking about it. So that's really interesting about the cyclicality of markets and business and interest rates and everything. And then the Dennis Waitley one for me was that I had never really, no one had before that exposed me to the thought of setting goals. And so the biggest thing that I got out of Dennis's thing was that the people who set goals achieve them and people who don't typically, that you have to have some thing that you're working towards or you're just kind of floating. And then he talked in that about visualization and how athletes who he trained, and he trained Olympic athletes and astronauts and all these amazing people, and actually did studies where they would visualize themselves on the bench pushing the weight up, and that enabled them in their minds to go and actually lift the weights that they hadn't lifted before. And a corollary of that is a guy named Roy H. Williams, who I just recently was exposed to. He's called the Wizard of Ads in Austin. And he says that for ads, you have to take the mind first to the place that the body will then go. And that ties back to those studies, I think, that Dennis did. And it's really true. So in your advertisements, you need to take people in their minds to the place that you want their fingers on the keyboard or their bodies or their dollars to go in the future. Because if you don't paint that story and take them there, then they don't ever go. So that was the big thing, I think, from Dennis. And then Tony did a fantastic job of synthesizing the work of Milton Erickson and Richard Bandler and John Grinder from neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis into especially an unlimited power, into a very digestible, understandable, non-scientific layman's kind of approach or layperson's approach to that science of NLP. And so I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. And it led me down the rabbit hole of all the people that he had studied and learned from. And from him, I think I really got the idea that really everything that you want to accomplish can be accomplished with mentoring, modeling, and masterminding. And so he was really the first time that I thought about, if you think like and take the actions of the people who you want to emulate, then you will be able to replicate the success that they've had. So those 3 things led from that past to that future thinking.
Wow. Okay, I want to go back very quickly to just talk a bit about maybe each of those things in a bit of detail, but to buy something for no money down. Now, I've heard you describe how you've bought businesses for no money down, and I think that will get some people in the head. How the hell do you do that? Can you give a quick example of how you might do that so people can comprehend it?
Yeah, it's so it is truly just a mindset thing, because the way that you do it is you make that offer. And so we're doing actually a few of those deals right now. I'll give you a few examples. Now, if you have absolutely nothing to offer, then it's harder. If you have no picture that you can paint of that they're better to sell you an interest in their business or all of their business for no money down, then it's more difficult. But I will tell you, I was trying to think of a really great example, and I'll think of rather than using me, I'll use someone who had no real reputation, no real connections, and no real experience doing this that I coached through it. And it was a gentleman who was interested in buying a wholesale concrete business, and this was the manufacturer of this kind of cool type of concrete. And so my friend was interested in acquiring that company, but didn't have the money to do it. It was doing about $2.5–3 million a year. It was profitable at about $150,000 to $200,000 a year profit, so in the neighborhood of 8 to 10% profit. And he didn't have any money or know anything other than he'd been talking to the owner, and the owner was interested in selling, and he was interested in buying, and the owner was only selling through print ads in magazines. So like old school, right? Print ads in magazines, had never, and was selling direct to customers. So had never sold directly to wholesalers, and had never sold online. So it was really kind of an interesting opportunity, and had inquiries before, but it was like, nah, I don't know how all that internet stuff works, and I don't want to hassle with other people who are reselling. So I just want to sell to the customers. And he said, but I'm thinking I've got this other thing that I want to do. I've invented something else that I'm really interested in now. So one of the biggest, coolest things is when you find someone who's already in their mind sold their business, like they're done. They're even if it's a good business, a truly creative entrepreneur frequently is tired of the business they're in and looking to the next business that they can be in. So that's a really positive sign. And I said, well, the first thing that I always like to ask people is, what are you going to do with the money? And he's like, why? And I was, because he's like, he's going to tell me it's none of my business. I said, no, it's actually 100% about your business, because if you can figure out what he or she is going to do with the money, then you'll find out exactly how much they actually need right now. And he was like, okay. So he went and asked him, and the guy said, well, it's going to cost me about $200,000 to do the moldings for this new thing that I've invented. I was like, great. I said, and what are you going to do with the rest of the money? He said, oh, I'm just going to, I'll have it for, working capital or investments or whatever. I said, great. I said, so you should be able to buy that company for $200,000 down. And he said, okay, well, how? Because that's all the guy needs to do that. And if you can find out what the deal is on the moldings that he needs for this invention that he's got, and you can get him those without you having to come out of pocket $200,000, you can buy that business for no money down. So the thing that I always look for is, what are they going to do with the money? And then how much is it going to actually cost to do the next thing that they want to do? And if they just want to have money for investments, chances are really good they'll carry back. So they will finance the acquisition for you. So great. So now he's down to $200,000. And I said, okay, so you need $200,000 to do this. I said, he probably doesn't need $200,000 right now to do that. I said, ask him, what is the process with the people that he's talking about doing the moldings? And it turned out that he only needed like about 80 grand. I was like, great, you only need $80,000 now, because the way that you pay for the moldings is this, and the business is actually making money. So let's let the business pay for everything except the actual cash dollars that he needs right now today. I was like, great. So he went back and talked to the guy, and the guy was like, I could, okay, I could do that. It's like, so that the money's going to come. You transfer the business to me. I will assign you the money that the business is making until you get that $200,000 that you need, and I'll secure the rest of the business with the stock in the business that I'm buying. Fantastic. Well, what we knew was that if we could get a small deferral period, then my friend could go out and go to all of the wholesalers who had already inquired about making wholesale purchases for the company and do deals with them to raise the $80,000 that he needed to put down. So all he needed to do was have a period of time where he could do that. So we negotiated a 60-day period where he would get to do that during the due diligence period for looking at the company, right? And so
Wow.
then he was able to raise the money, cut the deal to get advanced purchase orders from the people who were the wholesalers who had already asked and inquired. And then he went out and he did the deal with no money down. So that's that's a very abbreviated process of that. But that, like, it's just being creative enough to find out, what do they actually want? What are they going to do the money with? And what are all of the pieces that are available to you right now to generate the money without having to come out of pocket? And to me, it's a game, right? I just don't, I like, when I have the money to buy a business, I don't want to pay anything down for it because I want the business to pay for itself. That's a fun game to play, right?
Absolutely brilliant.
Now, Chief, do you want to take your game to a new level, or that of your people? Our mini MBA in leading high performance teams now has the highest NPS of any mini MBA style program in Australia at 91. Why? Because when you do the program, you get immediate and tangible performance improvement. You get dedicated time working on the business as opposed to away from it. We have a practical, real-world approach where we teach frameworks that you implement in your business as we go, and then you share and learn with your peers and with me as your coach. So the cost benefit is immediate, right? The weekly coaching sessions are live and you get a chance to ask questions direct to me and of your peers, and the time management is completely achievable because you're only spending a couple of hours a week on this at max, and those 2 hours are actually working on the business. So if you want to add something that really changes your game, it helps you become a real master of transformation and change, and to inspire your people and love your job, check out chiefmakeup.com/mini MBA.
Now, listen, I want to quickly chat about the work that you did with Tony Robbins, and particularly around neurolinguistic programming. And I think in his book, he calls it neurolinguistic conditioning. I think he gives a slightly different term, I think in Unlimited Power. But you go back to the originators, Milton Erickson, and the work that John Grinder did, and Richard Bandler. Have you learnt from any of those guys directly as well? Probably not Milton Erickson, but Grinder or Bandler?
Yeah, I read all their books. So I think there were 7 books that those guys wrote. So I read all of those, and I did a podcast with Frank Kern yesterday, and he came in and here in the house, and he came in, and I have a pile of books in the kitchen that's maybe 1.5 feet high, and it's all Milton Erickson and all this stuff. And he's
wow,
like,
cool.
Read that stuff. I was like, yes,
I
do, because Erickson, his whole therapy was, and his whole hypnotic approach was in telling stories.
That's right.
Like if you want to go back to the ultimate storyteller, and storytelling is very popular right now, but it's like he actually helped people get past psychosis with the telling of stories. And so to me, learning how he did that is the most, like, I think he's the ultimate storyteller. So I read as much of his stuff as I can possibly find.
Me too. In fact, you're the first person on the show that's ever mentioned him, and I actually learned advanced Ericksonian hypnosis from John Grinder about 10 years ago. That's awesome. And it was the most remarkable program I've ever done. So I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some of his work, because he was a very, very sick man who couldn't move almost his entire body, and he was doing full hypnotic trance induction with almost zero movement. Everything was the pitch and tone of his voice, the quality, and the stories that he told, and they're just amazing. So I'm going to put some things in the show notes to just say that they're just amazing.
I'm gonna walk in here actually while we talk.
Yeah,
get out, and I'm gonna walk in here to the stack of books and
show
see
us
what I've got. It's pretty funny. And Dostoevsky, right?
Yeah.
And then I've got Catherine the Great, and then my books from Erickson. I've got can you see that?
Healing Hypnosis. Yeah.
Healing and Hypnosis. I've got the papers, collected papers.
Oh, yeah. 2. Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
The hypnotic. There we go. Is that it?
Oh,
hypnotic,
yeah.
Right. So I've got all these books, and hypnotic realities, and all these other things. So Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley.
Yes, Jay Haley. Yeah.
Right. So to me, like that stuff, if you want to influence people and you want to market and you want to really get to the bottom of human psychology, those are the places to go and do that. So I get my hands
Exactly.
on as much stuff as I
Yeah.
possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I'll share something with you at a later date where you talk about the modeling. And I think this is something that most people have misunderstood about the history of NLP. They see it's all used in things like speed seduction. They get the history of it was that John Grinder and Bandler went and modeled Milton Erickson. They sat beside him for, I think, months to try and learn and replicate without communicating with Milton exactly what he was doing.
Yes.
But then eventually they got to the point where, because they were external and observing, they were able to work out what his patterns of influence were. So the use of his voice, the patterns of language. And that is where the original work of NLP came from one of the grand masters of hypnosis and influence. So anyway,
and have you listened to any of the recordings of how he did that with his voice and stuff?
Yeah.
It's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So
and
that's really cool. I'm so happy that you're into that, because it's
and I think a lot of people don't know that about me as well. So we've sort of unleashed the beast, so to speak. But this understanding that, I see a lot of very high performing people, and it fascinates me what is at the back end of it. And you look at guys like Tony Robbins, and that's his history is that, right? And you go, I remember actually at the mastermind that you and I both had in Texas, and people go, well, what is the hierarchy of your mentors? Like, who is your mentor of your mentor of your mentor? And I think for me, it actually goes back to Milton Erickson.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. Look, I know we don't have all day, unfortunately. So I want to talk a bit about this work you do in business. But you said, well, you're known for doing smart deals in business, and you just gave a great example of how doing smart deals. But something you said about this, something you say on your website, like you're passionate about business, music, nature photography, and even puzzles. But what always comes back to is this thing that you say you're 50% business and 50% creative. What do you mean by that?
It's just what I was just talking about in that deal. I had never really identified it. And when I went to get my website created, it's a guy named Dmitry Kozlov introduced me to somebody who is like draws the story out of you. And so I went through this process of sitting, and I was like, that's just bullshit. I mean, this is, my inner story and origin, all this crap. And I was like totally opposed to it, but open, if that makes sense. Like one of those things where you're, maybe I guess that it was skeptical would be I was very skeptical, but open. And I'm like, all right, I'll meet with the guy that does this, and I can get you his name. But I was like, we went and had a drink at a place I go pretty regularly, and sat down, and he just talked. And at the end of it, he's like, okay, I got it. I'm gonna go home, and I'll send you your thing when in 2 weeks or something like that. I was like, okay, cool, it's great. It's gonna be interesting to see what it is. But I thought he was a nice guy, enjoyed it, and he's a cool dude. But and he came back with that exact story that's on the origin story page of my website. And he came up with the 50% creative, and he said, I've only seen that of all the stories I've done one other time, and it was with Oprah Winfrey. And I was like, well, that's good company to be included in. But what it is I don't look at anything completely formulaically. I like puzzles. I like approaching things with an open mind, even if I'm skeptical, like I was with him, and happily to be open-minded but hard to convince, right? So if a business deal, a marketing problem, a business problem comes to me, I'm thinking about everything that I know that I've encountered before in every situation that is not business as much as I am business. And then it's somehow identifying, like not being constrained, I guess, to a formula that let's say, I'll use business acquisitions as an example, because I think it's a good one, is the way you buy businesses, you pay money for it. I don't accept that, right? I don't accept that as a fact of how you buy businesses. And so if somebody says, well, you buy a business and you pay money for it, or you trade something for it, and the way that you get money is you get money from a bank, or you get money from an investment banker, or you get a loan. None of that, right, is completely acceptable to me. And so if you go through the Toyota system of the 5 whys of, if you want to get to the root of any problem in manufacturing, the machine failed. Why did the machine fail? The machine failed because the ball bearings failed. Why did the ball bearings fail? Because they were not properly oiled and maintained. Why were they not properly oiled and maintained? Because there's no system for doing that. And if you keep asking those questions, usually within 5 times of asking it deep, you get to an answer that is the true answer. And so I like to do that, like with buying a business. I'll call it the 5 buys. So I can buy it for cash. Great. What if I can't buy it for cash? Oh, well, then you're going to get a loan. What if I can't get a loan? Well, then you're going to need to find another way, right? And you go through all of that. And at the end, if you do that exercise with pretty much any problem that you're trying to solve, and instead of accepting the traditional ways or the ways that you could do it easily, think about, what if I didn't have that? What if that wasn't possible? And then it just really makes you think about all of the other things that you could do, and you come up with a creative solution that can get you buying houses or companies, or solving huge problems with that you might not have otherwise been able to, because it was too easy to do this. It's too easy to say, well, I need money to buy a business. Okay, well, I can't get it, therefore I can't buy the business. No, what if you didn't? What if you couldn't buy businesses for money, right? Does that make sense? It's
it does. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I love the 5 buys. I think that is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So a good example is, we were doing a deal with a big software company. So Digital Marketer, which is one of the companies that I'm a principal in, was doing a deal with software, or wanted to do a deal with a software company. And everybody kept coming back to, the only way that we can do it is because there were all kinds of constraints. But the only way that we can do it to make this thing happen is to sell you a copy of the source code, which then you'll have to maintain on your own. And we were just all like, that makes absolutely no sense. And I think it was like $600,000 or something like that. And we ended up coming up with a very creative licensing deal with a joint marketing agreement that accomplished all of the objectives. And I remember sitting in the room. We were sitting in this giant conference room that they've got, this huge building with thousands of employees and everything. And their CEO and head of marketing and chief legal counsel and CFO and all these people are in there. And me and my business partner and Ryan Dice and our president of DM, Richard Lindner, and everybody was stuck on this source code thing. And I was like, well, what if we didn't do that? What if we did this and this and this? And we ended up doing a deal that would not have been possible had we not been creative at coming up with the solution. So I like that. Somebody explained to me the other day, a medical doctor who was trying to explain how a stroke affects people. And he said, look, it's a stroke is pathways to the brain. And you imagine that you always go down the interstate, and let's say that you can't go down the interstate. You have to take the side streets. Could you get to that place by doing that? And the answer is yes. And I was like, okay, well, now what if I said you can't, you can go that side street way, but you can't take any of the main streets on the side streets that you're used to, and that's what happens in a stroke situation with thought, that our thoughts are not allowed to go down the main way, and they're not allowed to go down the side streets, but they start down the side streets, and several of the main side streets that they know are missing. And now what are you going to do? And that's why it's so hard to form speech or things like that when you go through something like that. And I think that if you can simulate that a bit by removing all of the normal, easy, well-traveled roads to solve a problem that you're trying to solve, then you're forcing yourself to be truly creative in, how can I get to the end result? And it might be harder, but it might be that, in fact, the main roads in that situation, like bank financing is a perfect example, isn't available, that it's not an option because you don't have the assets or the wherewithal or whatever to make that happen, or the business doesn't have the fundamentals, or you don't want to personally guarantee it because you don't want to risk your own capital. And so I like the creativity of challenging yourself to remove the easy ways to do things and think about how can I accomplish this a different way. It's a very long answer to your question, so sorry for that.
Magic answer. I'm speechless. It's just so fantastic. So a lot of people that I work with are stuck in the middle management or upper layers of a large organization or even a mid-cap kind of businesses. And they want to know how to unstuck themselves, how they can progress, get some momentum back in their career. What advice would you give them?
I have a book that I'm working on right now with a guy named Tucker Max, who's written a bunch of books and is really, really good. Okay, so Tucker's a buddy of mine, and I'm an advisor to his company. And so the book is called Beware the Dancing Bear, because I look at, it was a conversation between Tony Robbins and Dean Graciosi, who's a kind of a well-known real estate person here. He sold like $1 billion worth of stuff. And Tony told Dean, he said, man, he said, we're the dancing bears. He said, as long as we're out there doing our thing, people are going to throw money. But the minute that we stop, the money stops. And so I need to find a way not to do that. And so at the time he said, I'm writing a book. I've worked out this deal with a fund manager, and the book is going to be all about money. It's going to be called Money Master the Game. And the purpose of the book is to ultimately get people into this fund that we've created. And I've identified that if I can get $1 billion under management, then I'll be set. I won't have to do anything more. And the last time that I looked, it was like $2 billion that he had under management. So for these folks,
was that with BlackRock that he did that with?
I think it was. I think it was. I don't know for sure.
If you read the book, it's in the book, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was really an interesting thing, and I like the analogy a lot. And so my book is it looks like it's going to be called Beware the Dancing Bear, right?
Like
so all of us in even a high income and low exit opportunity job or business, that's a dancing bear. So all of these folks who are in those positions, I think their path to freedom is either they're going to save enough money and have enough great investments that they go through the process and they get their gold watch or whatever the prize is at the end of the time, and they're told, congratulations, you've retired, or congratulations, we're making you retire. That at the end of that, like, that's the only way out, unless they can switch to being an entrepreneur. And in companies, they typically call those intrapreneurs, right? So for those people, my advice would be, find the thing that you're really good at, assuming that you like that stuff that you're doing now. Then within there, look for the opportunities where you and the company are saying, man, why is it that we do this? Or why is this so hard? And find those opportunities and then turn those into an opportunity to be an entrepreneur within the company, so that you have the company's resources to fund you and assist you, and you have a built-in buyer for the thing, and convince your company to be an investor in you in the venture that will make the life of the company better. That to me is assuming that you like what you do. Now, if you don't like what you do, I'd say get the hell out of the company and find the thing that you like on the side, create your side hustle that has the potential to take you out of that dollars for hours trade, that dancing bear situation that you're in, and then make your play there. Those to me are the ways to do it. I think that you can't stay. I think you can't stay trapped because you have one customer and you have no security, because if you're one customer, your employer decides that they no longer want to buy your goods, which is your services, then you're screwed, right? Whereas even if you have, I never bought that false security fallacy of the job thing, which is why I think I've not been an employee for so long. So for them, to me, it's that if you want freedom from that, then you've got the best partner in the world in your company, if your company's a good company and you like what you're doing, to help fund you into something that will be freedom for you. And if they're not willing to do that, or you aren't happy, because to me, if you're not happy, you sabotage. So people who try to, like, they're like, well, I absolutely hate it, but I'm going to go into the salsa making business. It's like, well, because that's a great opportunity. Or I hate right now, CBD is really hot here in the States, and coins like blockchain coin things. Well, if you're going into something like that just for a cash grab, you'll ultimately probably fail and definitely figure out a way to sabotage because you're not going to be happy. So yeah, to me, you got to have the work with people that you enjoy, have fun doing it, and be able to make money. If you can't do that, then you should probably pass. I don't know if that's a great answer or not, but to your question, but
I think it's a fantastic answer. One of the philosophies that I carry is that if you're in the corporate world, you do have to see yourself as a professional services firm of one. Right.
yes,
Even though you've got this full-time contract, that's all good and well, but your boss is your customer, your company is your customer, they're buying you. And at any point they can stop buying. So you
yes,
have to
exactly.
be incredibly valuable, and you have to keep getting more and more valuable every single day. And I really like your idea of saying, well, if I can free myself from this dancing bear place where if I don't turn up, I don't get paid, and do some sort of deal with the company I work for that's highly valuable for the company, very valuable for me. And maybe it's got to do with IP or whatever it is that you're putting together, or a deal, then, you might have something that's a bit more lasting.
Yeah, and I'll say too, to me, when you're thinking about what you want to do next, or even what you're doing now, I think that thinking about the possibility of building an asset that you can sell while you are receiving income is very, very smart. And there are three typical ways that companies are valued in terms of exit. They are seller distributable cash, which is a smaller company that doesn't have a very deep management team and is maybe doesn't have systems and procedures, and one person is kind of responsible. So that seller distributable cash is the cash you took out of the business in the last year. Basically, it's profit, but maybe not quite profit because you didn't take all the profit out. Then the next level is a business that will sell for a multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is basically profit, right? They will sell for a multiple of that, meaning you can get paid at some point when you decide you don't want to have that company anymore, several years of income, a multiple of years of income. And then the third type is company that sells for a multiple of revenue, not a multiple of profit, but a multiple of revenue, which are typically subscription, recurring revenue businesses, software companies, media companies, things like that. And if you think about what you're going to do and the company that you're in right now, you can choose where you want to be. You can choose that you want to only get part of a year's income, or several years income, or several years revenue based on where you steer your company. And so, like a lot of the folks that we advise, where we start with where's the opportunity for monthly recurring revenue, and let's work towards being able to say, okay, there's several different possibilities of industry that you could fall into right now. And this is applicable to your guys, so I will tie this all back, right? There's several types of, let's say that, because you mentioned IP, let's say that right now you're a consultant in a company, inside a company, and you're receiving a monthly contract of $20,000 a month. Fantastic. That's good as long as it lasts, and then it goes away. That consulting business is really only typically worth, especially if you're under a couple $1 million a year, it's going to be worth whatever you're actually taking out of it. And it's going to be really hard to sell. So if instead of that, you could say, well, this company, I've identified within this company that if they would automate these 5 things, that would be a lot, and that would enable them to be significantly more efficient, save them money, and increase their profitability. It would also reduce their dependence on staff and have a reduction in the cost of benefits that you have to pay employees now, and all these other great things. Fantastic. Can I design software around that? Because I can consult on it, or we could hire people to come in. But instead, if I was able to develop software that would do that, software typically sells, especially if I could get them to do it on a monthly recurring revenue basis. So they pay for the software a certain amount every month. Software typically sells for a multiple of revenue, right? Especially if it's got monthly recurring revenue and relatively low churn. So you can steer that consulting contract into actually a software development deal where you keep equity in the company, and maybe you and the company co-develop it together. And now you've got something that's an asset that will generate income for you, but also has exit value, and it has exit value at a multiple of revenue, which is the highest possible exit that you can get, that's kind of a cool choice to make. So knowing that there are these three options of how you can exit, and you could continue to consult, or you can get to that defensible IP that you mentioned and have a revenue exit, that's a kind of a good strategy. So I'm always looking for, how can I exit at a multiple of revenue?
Very, very smart. I hadn't considered the multiple of revenue angle, and parting with the company you already work for. I think that's pure brilliance.
Chiefs, more from Roland in a minute. Now, recently, I had Bat Abrahams, author of Think Faster, Talk Smarter, on the show. We spoke about managing your reputation before you enter the room, thinking on your feet, and getting to the point. Here's what Matt had to say about getting and sustaining people's attention.
My mother has this wonderful saying. I know she didn't create it, but I attribute it to her. Tell the time, don't build the clock. Many of us are clock builders when we communicate. So if we can have the right mindset and approach, we structure our messages, and we work on being concise and clear, we can be much better communicators in any situation, but especially spontaneous speaking.
You can listen to that inspiring discussion with Matt by going to chiefmaker.com/332. Right, Chief, let's get back to our best of series with Roland Frasier.
Now, is your book going to cover that sort of angle, or more of your business owner?
No, it's all of that stuff.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I can't wait till it comes out. I'll make sure we put that up as a post.
Me too. I would really like for it to already be written. I'm in the process of doing it.
That's all right. Well, when you and Tucker are finished with it, we'll get it promoted down under, because I know a lot of people that would want to learn about that.
Fantastic.
Now, just what other books should people read now to understand a lot of what you teach and what you work on? What, maybe if it's books, podcasts, online courses, what should they do?
I mean, there's the interesting thing is, I just spoke at a friend of mine, Joe Polish, has this thing called Genius Network that he does every year. And the panel that I was on was on a buying, selling businesses panel. So there were several people that were expert at different things. And it's really funny because everyone who is in that industry will tell you that there's really no great book on it. And so, like, I can tell you there are things that I would highly recommend that people read, because I think they're really great at helping you get to where you want to go. But on this particular topic, there really isn't a great, I'm fortunate that there isn't a great thing on that, because that's what I'm trying to create, right? It's all tribal knowledge within investment banks, and then the investment banks go about it in a really traditional way. So you could read the McKinsey way. You could read the Lords of Strategy and look at strategy and kind of how businesses think. You could listen to the Boston Consulting Group lectures and things like that. These are all strategy consulting firms, but they don't talk about they're a little more ethereal in their thinking, and not practical, because I kind of scrappy because I had to be when I was coming up. So they don't typically think scrappy. There are people that go to business school and have models and beta risk and all these things like that, and they're fantastic, but they don't allow you to go down under it and say, okay, well, now how do I take that stuff and actually make some things happen if I don't have, step one, have a $6 billion fund. The other books that I think would be, or resources that would be great, would be to buy John Doerr, Doerr's book called Measure What Matters. But don't buy the print book or the Kindle, buy the audiobook, because on the audiobook, you'll listen to Larry Page from Google and Bono from U2 and all of these people who are the people who created and ran these amazing businesses, telling you how they used Andy Grove, who founded Intel's High Output Management, which is a book, but not as good as this one, style of OKRs, which are objectives and key results, which John Doerr talks about in that book. And all of them are talking about how they use these. It gives you chills when you're listening to them the first time, because it's like, I'm literally like sitting in a room with Bono telling how they're going to eradicate malaria in Africa. I'm literally listening, hanging out at a bar with Larry Page telling me that Google would not be what it is without, I think there's 7 streams of 7 different business units of Google with over 1 billion customers. And he's like, that would not happen if I didn't have John Doerr and OKRs. So
Wow.
that's a really powerful book. And
Yeah.
then the last one would be Covey's book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, because so few people focus on leading indicators and they get caught up in what they're doing. And that book talks about how to deal with the way they call it the whirlwind of activity that's around you that you have to do. But rather than looking at lagging indicators like, did I increase the sales in my business by 100% this year? It really breaks down into the leading indicators of what are the things that are going to cause me to do that, and how am I monitoring those on a week-to-week basis to be sure that those things happen. So that conglomeration of stuff, plus hopefully the one I'm writing will be really good resources.
And a year's learning, like to then go and apply, right? Excellent. So how can people connect with you and learn more about what you do?
So Digital Marketer is one company that I'm involved in heavily. So as far as from a marketing standpoint, I definitely check out Digital Marketer. We have a ridiculously good blog at digitalmarketer.com that costs $0 to check out. And then our biggest event, which we exited part of this year, we sold a controlling interest in it earlier this year, is Traffic and Conversion Summit. So Traffic and Conversion Summit is the largest in North America digital marketing conference. And then for me personally, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all of those places. I have lots of presentations on SlideShare. So those are all good places.
You do explain your dancing bear strategy in a slide deck that's on SlideShare. So I'll try and put a link to that as well so people can see it.
Okay, great. I'm just starting a podcast. That's
probably
the best thing. Yeah,
really?
I was when I mentioned I had Frank Kern and his wife were here last night.
Yeah.
We recorded for about an hour and a half, I think. And I've got one with Tucker, and we've got Bob Cialdini that wrote Influence, and a bunch of other cool people really diving into their way of thinking and stuff. So that's my baby right now. So that's probably the best. It's called Business Lunch with Roland Frasier, and it launches Wednesday, December 5th. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, well, we'll make sure we put a few things up on that for you as well. That'll be great.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. Can you nominate another CEO you hold with great respect you think should be on the Inner Chief?
Tell me what your people most would like to hear. Like what would serve them the best?
I think one of the challenges for most of the people we work with, here's a few things. I think dealing with all sorts of different challenging people is because it's a political environment, it's hard, you get difficult people to work with, in all sorts of places of corporate, what's maybe above you and below you in the organizational structure, even your peers. 2, around confidence is another really big one, because the business world can really shatter your confidence because you don't always get your own way. Things can go wrong. People aren't quite sure how or why. And probably the last one is around just achieving some general happiness around balance, motivation, maintaining energy, because it can really be soul destroying in the corporate world. So really it's about thriving in the corporate world. I think that's the big one. That's my big passion, is helping people within a large organization who aren't entrepreneurs like you and I. How do they thrive? Okay, in that world. That's the kind of speaker or guest I'm really keen to have on the show.
So there are 2 that I think would be really good. One is who works with professional athletes, but the professional athlete world, as you know, is very corporate and very hierarchical. And his name is Todd Herman. He would be really great because he has some very, very unique and effective strategies for helping people deal with other people and deal with difficult situations. It's actually really, really cool. And I think you would get a kick out of talking with them. I'll happily introduce you. And the second would be a friend of mine, Kamal Ravikant. Kamal is the brother of Naval Ravikant that founded a company called AngelList, which is kind of the hub for all deals in Silicon Valley. And so he was an early investor in Uber and Twitter and YouTube, and I'm just like golden. But he also went through a very difficult time where he was his hair was literally falling out. He was so stressed out, and he
It's called
went through.
alopecia, I think, is it?
I'm sorry.
I think it's called alopecia. Yeah.
Yep. And he went through that really hard time and came out of it so much better by learning how to deal with it. He wrote a book called How to Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends Upon It. Now he's got one called Rebirth. And so he's writing while he's managing an investment fund that invests in all of these super hot tech companies in this highly competitive area. And I think he'd be really interesting to talk about the strategies of how to deal in those really high stress situations as well. So Todd for confidence and Kamal for stress, and then both of them for working within those challenging situations.
That'd be great. No, I look forward to trying to get them on the show. Now, listen, final question for you. The floor is yours. You can wax lyrical as much as you like, okay? What is your final message of wisdom and hope for the next generation of executives?
I would want to think about that. That's a lot of responsibility. I think that the most important thing is that I've learned is that momentum is everything in business. Can you leave that on for just 1 minute? Because I'm finishing a video podcast right now. I got my lights cut off. Sorry, but that's my wife telling me it's time to go. But the thing is that momentum is everything. And if you can structure your life in such a way that you can maintain your momentum, that's really key for entrepreneurs in particular. That I live in a neighborhood where lots of people have retired. They've made their money and they exited and they're bored to tears, and they either get involved in bad things or they're bored out of their minds and they wish they could get back. And if they had only structured themselves so they could keep the platforms that had their momentum and effectively keep the goose while selling the golden eggs, which is a longer conversation than I know we have time for right now, but that's really important. What that means is that as you're designing your business, if you can have separate sales departments, media departments, event departments, etc., if you sell one of those things, you won't lose all of the other things that you had. So when we sold our event, we sold a domain name, a customer list, and a trademark, but we still have our sales team, our sponsorship sales team, our media company, all our marketing company, all of that. We didn't lose any of it. And that's a big deal. Being able to focused on momentum, that's key.
Roland, it's been an absolute pleasure. We could literally go on for hours, and I'd love to, but another time perhaps. So thank you so much for your time
Anytime.
And your wisdom.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
No worries. Thank you so much. Cheers, Roland.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Righto, Chief. That sums it up for this week. Now, what we discussed there with Roland today is some very important skills and techniques that all senior executives need to get better at. We need to understand the art of deal better. We need to understand why we should potentially buy rather than grow. We need to understand what makes each of us special and unique and valuable in the market. We've got to decommoditize ourselves and make ourselves uniquely valuable. And Chief, above all, we need to learn to be master communicators. And all those things are what Roland has achieved in his career. To get all the links and resources, go to chiefmaker.com/333. And if you'd like to stay in touch with Chiefmaker, just go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus on the show bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chief. As always, remember to stay happy.